Hello, everyone. Welcome to Solo Arts Heal here on the Marsh Stream. I am Brian Williamson, General Manager for the Marsh and Marsh Stream, and we are so excited to have you joining us tonight. Just a few housekeeping things before we begin tonight's show. While we do not have to worry about turning off our cell phones, as everyone is muted and we can't hear you, if you would, however, use that cell phone and visit our website, themarsh.org, and support us by making a tax-deductible tip in our tip jar. All donations for tonight's performance are matched by a generous member of our board. Help support us so we can keep bringing you these free shows every week. Also, want to say hello to our YouTube viewers. Almost all of our Marsh Stream shows are archived right there on our YouTube channel, so please make sure to subscribe, stay notified, and catch up on all of our past shows. Finally, don't forget we still have some exciting things happening this week. Thursday is a repeat of founder Stephanie Wiseman's interview with Jacob Kornbluth. This highlights his new series, Talk Boring to Me, in collaboration with W. Kamau Bell. Friday is CJ's Fitnessing at noon, and then bingo with Marsh performer Josh Kornbluth at 7:30 that evening. Saturday, we've got Fred Pitts, who joins the Marsh Stream with his full-length performance, Aren't You? So again, you can visit our website, themarsh.org, for all of that information. So now let's get on with tonight's show and the reason we're all here. So let me introduce my good friend and Solo Arts Heal hostess, Gail Schickele, to tell us more about that. Hello, Gail.
Thanks, Brian. And thanks to the Marsh Stream for offering nightly entertainment and community services from COVID isolation, but inspired by 30 years with such artistry as the Marsh breeding ground for solo performance. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Solo Arts Heal. It's terrific to have our Solo Arts Heal group as part of the Marsh Stream, where artists may share inspiring and courageous life stories as survivors and caregivers, stories of overcoming adversity, surviving mental and physical challenges, and becoming health advocates. As we have for you tonight, with Joshua Rivedal, it's an inspiring true story about trauma and suicide, and how he not only turned his life around, but after getting help, has dedicated his life to bring awareness to mental health issues, suicide prevention, diversity, and social change. Solo Arts Heal is our gift to our communities by offering information and inspiration for individual and community empowerment and advocacy. Here each week, we shed light on diverse topics of mental and physical health, scenarios shared across all communities, offering healing through the arts through performance and informance, including the health crisis of climate change and what we can do about it. All these shows are presented free with a tip jar as a service to our communities, featuring outstanding talent, performing from home in isolation because of the pandemic, in relative safety from the ravages of fires and storms exacerbated by climate change, with talkbacks with our audience on varied health issues that embrace the healing power of the arts, with drama, and with humor. As I always say, laughter is good medicine. Tonight, for Suicide Prevention Month, we're pleased to have with us Josh Rivedal, an inspiring resource for us all as we navigate these uncertain times. A reminder that we are not alone. There are resources to help and people who care. Let me introduce you to him. Joshua Rivedal is a speaker, actor, playwright, author, and social entrepreneur. He is the creator and founder of Changing Minds, a mental health-based curriculum, and the I'm Possible project. Paired with his one-man show based on his book, The Gospel According to Josh, he has spoken about suicide prevention and mental health across the U.S., Canada, the UK, and Australia. He is trained in community counseling from the Southern California Counseling Center and in suicide prevention modalities QPR and ASSIST. His occasional coursework on suicide prevention is taught, his original coursework, is taught in Washington State to various professions such as dentists and pharmacists. And as an actor, Joshua's voice has been heard on U.S. national commercials and is part of the award-winning voiceover cast of The Art of Secrets by James Cleese. He's the author of 6 books and a co-author of 3 peer-reviewed journal papers, one on the trajectory of the survivor of suicide loss, another on the art of living with chronic illness, and the third on surviving trauma. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming with readings and performance from his solo show and book, The Gospel According to Josh, Josh Rivedal.
I'm so grateful to be here tonight, combining 2 of my favorite pastimes, Solo arts and being on Zoom. Just kidding about the Zoom. So I wanna give you all a little context, and so glad you're here, whether you're watching the recording or if you're with us live. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna give you a little context, then I'm gonna read some of my book, then I'm gonna give you a little more context, and then I'm gonna do a little bit of my one-man show, a little more context, a little more book, and then Gail and I are gonna talk to each other. So this one man show slash book is called The Gospel According to Josh. I wrote the play and performed the play in 2009 into 2010. So wrote it in '09, wrote a little bit more in 2010, did it in 2010 in New York City in a couple of festivals, and then got invited to do it in Philadelphia. And part of the play, it's largely a comedy, and I play 16 different characters in it. And the one of the larger themes that I didn't realize until I performed it in front of audiences was my dad's suicide. He died by suicide in 2009, and right before I started writing the play, actually, and that ended up making it into the piece because the piece is a true story with some embellishments, of course, composite characters. But so I did the show, did really well. That was something that people really connected with. However, I didn't quite understand that. Didn't quite understand mental health and wellness. That wasn't even part of the show. It was just I was just doing theater. Like, let me just do some theater, y'all. And beginning of 2011, 14 months after I put this one man show up in New York City for the first time, I was in suicidal crisis myself. A lot of major change happening all at once, some betrayal, some loss, some grieving, a lot of trauma involved, especially at the tail end of losing my dad to suicide, and not to mention two undiagnosed health conditions, one of them being clinical depression, one of them being generalized anxiety disorder. Yes, they are health conditions, not just mental health, but your brain is part of your body. That's why I said mental. That's why I said health. That being said, coming out of that, getting help, I decided I wanted to be helpful and do different things with my life, and wasn't sure if I was going to be a lunch lady or a crossing guard or what I was going to do. And I decided I was going to start speaking out about these issues, because if I was having a hard time, I was almost certain, and I found out it was true, that other people were having a hard time as well. So I paired this one man show with suicide prevention in the first time in May of 2011. And since then I've done over 300 presentations of that one man show, plus suicide prevention in 4 different countries. And that same year I started writing this book, The Gospel According to Josh, a 28-year Gentile bar mitzvah. And so part of it is based on the show, but it expands much greater recovery process, dad, mom, family life. It's really my coming of age. And so I want to start off doing reading just the first chapter, and then I want to perform a little bit of the one man show. The reason I'm not doing a full 20 minutes of the show is I just feel super weird doing it on Zoom. I've done lots of Zoom presentations, but not full on acting. And so I think you're going to get me sitting here and doing a couple of these characters. And so thank you for that. And thank you for this opportunity. But here we go. I'm going to read the first chapter of the Gospel According to Josh. So we're going to start off with chapter 1, an epilogue, part 1, sort of. There I was at William Woods University in the middle of Missouri, decked out in a long-sleeved blue flannel shirt and faded boot-cut jeans, standing behind a podium under a warm spotlight in front of a few hundred wide-eyed college students and some anxious faculty members, vocally paralyzed and desperately wishing I could gather myself just long enough to string together a few coherent sentences for this room full of academics. I felt like I was living that awful nightmare. You know, the one where you're standing in front of a large group of people, ready to say something epic and groundbreaking, except somehow you left your house not only forgetting to wear your pants, but your underpants as well, prompting the crowd to point, laugh, and throw rotten tomatoes at you with their free non-pointing hand. However, this moment of paralysis I was having on stage at William Woods University was all too real. I was definitely wearing pants, and this being November, tomatoes were out of season. I had never gone stiff in front of a crowd in my entire life. By the tender age of 6, I was already wooing handkerchief-waving old ladies in a church congregation of more than 500 as a song and not so much dance man. Performing on stage was as second nature to me as breathing, eating, and sleeping. But standing next to that podium and sweating under those lights, I began to experience what seemed like some kind of spiritual out-of-body experience, which would have been awesome if I were drinking peyote tea in New Mexico with Tommy Chong and a psychoactive Sonoran desert toad. But God knows I'm not that lucky. And whatever transcendent experience I was having was happening at the worst possible time. I could almost see a part of me floating above my head, finding its way to a seat in the front row, eagerly anticipating whatever was going to happen next. It was like that scene from The Adventures of Tom Sawyer when Tom and Huck were sitting in the rafters watching their own funeral. Except this wasn't supposed to be my funeral, this was my resurrection party, and I desperately wanted to celebrate with the auditorium full of spectators in front of me. But with every silent second that passed, my credibility and grip on mystique and intrigue loosened, especially with the younger students whose hands were reaching for their smartphones on their hips to fill the time, being sucked away by the lifeless question mark of a man standing before them. And it was here that the much needed role of cheerleader was filled by the usually ornery and disapproving voices in my head. If my brain was put up to a sonar machine, these voices would sound much like a cacophony of a Bible quoting ball of religiosity due to my evangelical formative years, a wannabe ghetto fabulous street person due to my affinity for early 1990s hip hop, and a Spanglish mala palabra spewing joker as a result of working in restaurants with Mexican and Ecuadorian line cooks. Speak! Make a joyful noise unto the Lord. You got this, my dude, for shizzle. Si se puede, wey. Following this short bit of internal dialogue, my joints began to thaw, and my dexterity returned to my hands. I dabbed at my eyes with the knuckle of each forefinger, licked my lips, and couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened to me in the last 2 years. I was lucky to be alive and standing on that stage. This trippy and reminiscent stupor was quite possibly the longest 15 seconds of my life. Just as I regained my ability to speak, I went into the front left pocket of my jeans and removed my wallet. Inside was a tattered piece of computer paper folded over 4 times, which I quickly unfurled and read to myself. Scribbled on that piece of paper were 3 things that kept me alive only 10 months earlier. I crouched over just slightly to drop the paper into my book bag, sitting at my feet behind the podium. How's everybody doing? I asked my audience while wiping small gobs of sweat mixed with hair wax from my temples. So basically, I've performed the one-man show you just saw, The Gospel According to Josh, outside of the college arena quite a bit. It all started as a piece of theater in New York City where people really dug the comedy of it, but truthfully, much of the initial response I heard was in whispers. People were talking about the end, about my father's suicide and what they thought they knew about him and what they thought they knew about suicide. But I knew what they were saying wasn't true. It was incorrect. What I was hearing, and bear with me on this, reminded me of how we as children first learned about sex, which was how? On the playground, right? Sadly, my playground was particularly slow, but bless our little hearts, until the age of 12, I thought a fallopian tube was something people brought to a water park so they didn't drown. But fortunately, with sex, we catch up and learn what we need to know in school. So by the age of 15, 16, we learn what we need to know. Though some of you delinquents in the back still have no idea what's going on. I'm just kidding. You guys are all right back there. Get on with the story, brother. That's a subtitle, by the way. You wouldn't know that unless I told you. Right. So right about now, you might be wondering, why, Josh? Why are you telling me all this? What could you possibly gain by revealing yourself to the world by choosing to tell this story? And to that I say, what story? I never promised to tell you a story, but I'll make a deal with you. If you finish all your dinner and wash your face, I will tell you a tale of struggle and survival, a gospel account of a young man's passage into manhood, his 28-year Gentile bar mitzvah, a view into the life of a chronically unhappy artist and religious expat who wanted nothing more than to find the meaning in his father's suicide and his own happily ever after, only to go through 3 circles of hell and a near-death experience to get everything he had always wanted. Now put your arms and legs inside the vehicle. You're in for a bumpy ride. So that was chapter 1, a prologue of sorts of my book based on my one-man show. And so here, next, I'm going to perform the very first, the opening scene to my one-man show, where I'm about age 5, and I am in Sunday school, and my choir teacher, Mrs. G, is about to have us singing a song. So here I'm going to break into my first character, Mrs. G, in this one-man show, The Gospel According to Josh, also known now as Kicking My Blue Jeans in the Butt. Here we go. Okay, ready? Oh, hi, boys and girls. Hi, boys and girls. Squeeze it in. Shh, be quiet. Shh, squeeze it in. Shh, shh. Be quiet. Okay. All right. Kindergarten and pre-K. Here we go. Okay. Oh, there you go. All right. Be quiet. Shh, shh. Be quiet. Shut up. Good, good. Okay, here we go. You know what we're here to do, boys and girls. We're here to sing for Jesus, the J Man. Okay, ready? One, two, two and a half. Oh, you're too young for fractions. Three. O, B, E, D, I, E, N, C, E. Very good, Jimmy. Obedience is the very best way to show that you believe. Very good, boys and girls. Now we're going to sing it again, but we're going to clap each letter one at a time until we sing the whole song. 10 times. We've got to remember to obey the great leader, Jesus, and our parents. That especially means you, Joshua Rivedal. You zip it, mister. The little talkative Timmy. Ready? Okay, boys and girls. B, E, D. Okay, so growing up in this cult-like atmosphere was very hard for someone like me. And for as long as I can remember, I have been trying to get away from it. Now, it wasn't just that we went to this place, this church, literally 10 times a week, or that I went to school there from kindergarten to 8th grade. It wasn't just that we weren't allowed to participate in such enjoyable activities as dancing, swearing, one of my all-time favorites, and secular non-Christian music. No, the thing that really chapped my hide, the thing that killed me, was the fact that this church preached fire and brimstone against the evils of television in Hollywood, because as far back as I can remember, I wanted to be a movie star. Now, as a 4-year-old, when I was supposed to be taking a nap, I would turn on the TV very quietly so no one would catch me, and I would watch my stories. I lived vicariously through B.A. Baracus and the rest of the A-Team, and whenever we played A-Team on the playground, I made sure I was a Christian. B.A. Baracus, I pity the fool who violates the golden rule. Well, I wanted to be Chandler from Friends, Bugs Bunny from Looney Tunes, and George Lopez from the George Lopez Show. These guys were the titans of TV. They lived and breathed adventure, drama, and comedy, and I wanted to be just like them. I even remember as a 5-year-old having a dream, a nighttime dream about being a guest star on a show called Seventh Heaven, and becoming the love interest of a young lady who you know now as Mrs. Justin Timberlake, but back then she was just Jessica Biel. And in my nighttime dream, Jessica and I lived happily ever after in a loving, monogamous relationship. I was 5 years old, people. That's weird. And it was after that dream that I knew in my little heart that somehow television or Hollywood would save me and would be my way out of the crazy religious world that I lived in. So that's just a little taste of my one-man show. And chronologically speaking, if I were to continue doing that, you'd get a chance to meet my dad, who's a stocky character, a big guy, and very disapproving and very discouraging of my dreams to be a star. And I try to join the church choir, and that's not good enough. And you get to see a little bit of some of the abusive nature that he had toward me, and then going through life, sort of moving forward, and finally sort of making it big in show business for a while. Kind of fast forward and go through all the shenanigans that I've gone through. At age 19, I was on the Maury Povich show as an actor, and a lot of people thought it was real, and just a whole bunch of other things. And I finally started doing legitimate work in show business, and it's still quite not good enough. And then towards the end of the piece, our relationship gets better. His relationship with my mom gets worse, and there's a history of suicide in my family, and that's touched upon very briefly in the show, very briefly. And toward the end, he dies by suicide, and not just because of my mom, but because of I believe some undiagnosed health conditions and mental health conditions, and just the man didn't take care of himself. And so that threw me into a great deal of trauma. That trauma part isn't part of the show, but I get to expand upon it a little more in this book. And so what's kind of cool is that this book, we dive into some of that show, some of the show that I just mentioned, and then what I went through in my own crisis. And so I opened our session now with the beginning of the book. I want to close with the end of the book because this is sort of a whole. I want to kind of take you on this holistic experience. And so I'm going to jump around a little bit in this last chapter, but I want people to see a little bit of what life looks like after experiencing some really high highs. Like when I did this show in New York and Philly, good reviews, was getting a chance to make a living off of it, and yet I still was unfulfilled. And it wasn't really until I started paying attention to my mental health and wellness, and really when I started to help other people, that life really began to go on the upswing. And so I want people to see just a different side of things and a different side of the arts, and what different things can look like within the arts and within the human experience. So this is just another way to do things. This is the very last chapter, and I'm going to jump around a little bit because there's some stuff without context, so you're just not going to know what's happening. So I'm going to jump around and kind of cut and paste. But here we go. This is chapter 45, an epilogue part 2, a year to remember. School was out for the semester, and I got A's in all my college classes. The not living in my stomach had vanished completely, and life felt more pliant than even before my head-on collision with depression and suicide. The browns, whites, grays, and blacks that had previously colored my world were now intermingled with vibrant blues, greens, yellows, and reds. To put it simply, I looked forward to waking up every morning. I decided that the dual focus of that summer would be my own mental wellness and friendships, and building the suicide prevention arm of the gospel according to Josh. I met an enchanting psychologist at Baruch College named Tina. I began to see her as a patient and joined the ranks of the approximately 25 million Americans who regularly see a psychologist or psychiatrist. It made me feel whole to be able to speak about some of my deepest, darkest secrets to someone who didn't expect anything from me and wasn't passing judgment on me as good or bad. I was simply Josh and had the ability to create whatever world I wanted to live in. Subtitle, The Rev. The following week, I was due for a visit with my good high school friend, Zach, and his fiancée, Joanne. Late in the spring, they had mentioned that I would be participating in their July wedding as a groomsman. We were meeting to touch base on some last-minute wedding details. However, when Zach picked me up at the train station, he was Joanne-less. Hey, dude, I said while wrapping my arms around my old friend, where's your lady friend? She won't be joining us. I have something important to discuss with you, he said with a smile that bordered on mischievous. Oh, do tell, my friend, I'm intrigued, I expressed with delight as we got into his pickup truck. Nope, he said, waving me off with a solemn glare. Not until lunch. Is Mexican okay? On the ride to the restaurant, I couldn't help but consider all the combinations and permutations of the mysterious and probable bad news he was going to dump on me. Halfway through our meal, and all we managed was mindless chatter. While picking through the corn husks of my tamales, hoping for more meat or masa, he finally explained, Joanne and I, we don't want you in the wedding party. You're not going to be a groomsman anymore. He spoke without any remorse. In fact, he looked rather pleased with himself, dropping this bomb that threatened to completely destroy our friendship. What happened? I asked with a lump in my throat that made me sound like a drunk Kermit the Frog impersonator. What did I do? Nothing, he said, his laughter making my discomfiture swell. Dude, we want you to officiate the wedding. We want you to do the ceremony. What? I asked, astonished at that instant change in my good fortune. You can't be serious. Yes, I am. You're a good friend, and we thought you'd add some flair and theatricality to the ceremony, he said, placing his hand on my shoulder. So what do you say? Yes, of course, man. It would be an honor. I was delighted. Like a little boy eating his way through a bag of pixie sticks while playing with his 3 new puppies at Disneyland on Christmas morning. I promised Zach all the flair and theatricality he could stand on the biggest and most important event of his life. Poetry, candlelighting, a beautiful speech, and a team of monkey groomsmen. After Zach rejected my monkey groomsman idea, we agreed to collaborate on the ceremony together, and I promised to find out how to get licensed as a minister. It had to be a legal wedding. Upon arriving back at my apartment that evening, I searched online for organizations that offered ordination without requiring a class or church service, the thought of which was daunting after having attended some form of church activity nearly 5,000 times in my youth. I found the Universal Life Church. Completing the arduous 5-minute process of giving them my name, address, and credit card information, I became an ordained minister. My title, Bishop Rividal, pastor or priest, His Holiness or Eminence, rabbi or imam, friar or cardinal, these were all too extravagant. I'm a man of the people. Reverend Rividal or the Rev would do nicely. I was now licensed in almost every US state to perform weddings and funerals. In some cases, I could even perform a bris, and for my troubles, I could take tips. That joke never gets old. My decision to stay alive was looking sweeter and sweeter with each passing day. The circle of life. In the middle of my 7th grade year at the Christian school that I attended, I got caught passing notes to some girls in my class. We were trying to make each other laugh by coming up with the dirtiest words we knew. Written on the paper were the words masturbate, pussy, uterus, and dick. I may have been the one who wrote uterus, but I took the rap for everyone involved and immediately got sent down to the principal's office with a note. The principal, Miss Bilbo, an unpleasantly plump spinster who had been much friendlier as my 2nd grade teacher, screamed at me to step into her office at once. I cannot believe you, Joshua. You of all people, she said, spittle flying out of her mouth and onto the desk in front of her. I expected more out of you. I had always thought of you as a leader, as someone who grew up one day to become a famous minister, someone who would preach to thousands, maybe even millions. But there's no way you could ever amount to that or anything else writing notes like this, she said, while shaking her fist at me. I do not have much hope for your future anymore, Joshua. Now get out of my office. The evening following my holy ordination, I called my mother to share the good news. Well, you may be a minister in the eyes of the government, but you aren't in the eyes of God. You need a ministry, she said with a hint of contempt, satisfied with her perceived theological supremacy over her heathen non-church going son. Her assessment of my clerical legitimacy took the wind out of my sails. To be a true minister in her eyes, I needed to attend the needs of others with tender loving kindness. But wait, I do have a ministry. Soon I'm going to be speaking to hundreds, if not thousands of people this year about suicide prevention. I'm going to help people like you helped me. The thought that I would have become a true minister would have made Miss Bilbo proud or hungry. So you are, she said without the slightest hint of emotion in her voice, but I may have heard the corners of her lips crease upward. So be it, and amen. I've been everywhere, man. Toward the end of that summer 2011, I put the finishing touches on a set of educational materials to accompany the Gospel According to Josh Youth Suicide Prevention Program. During the fall semester of 2011, I was able to visit 4 universities and bring them my message. All in all, that first year, I traveled to 20 different schools across the entire United States, including Hawaii. I made new and lifelong friends with whom I was able to commiserate, hold, and hug, a palatable array of sweet and savory tempered with a dash of bittersweet. I would never have savored the depth of any of these flavors if not for my father's suicide and my own near-death experience. Fall 2012. In early September 2012, I began yet another year of school appearances with the Gospel According to Josh at Defiance College in Ohio. Setting up for the event and while retrieving a few loose props at the bottom of my book bag, my fingers grasped onto a crumpled piece of paper. It was brown and nearly falling to pieces from age. The scribble marks on the outside of the paper looked vaguely familiar. I unfurled the paper delicately so and discovered that the writing was mine. It was the sheet of paper that contained the 3 reasons why I had chosen to live. A page that took me on a quick trip 18 months back into my dark past. I hadn't seen or thought about what was on this piece of paper in what had to be more than a year. Reading the writing of a desperate man armed with only a glimmer of hope was utterly surreal. 1, I'll feel so guilty. If I kill myself, Erica and Jacob will probably be very upset. I can't let them lose their father and their brother not like this. 2, there could be other adventures, many of them which I'll never experience. Machu Picchu, Hawaii, Antarctica, outer space. 3, a family of my own, a soulmate, a happily ever after, a fairy tale ending. Kneeling over my book bag, I pored over those 3 little bullet points and was immediately filled with angst. I wondered if I'd ever achieve the last 3 words written on that paper. And then it hit me. So I jumped to my feet and crumpled that sheet of paper and threw it high into the air into the blackness of the unlit stage behind me. I had no need for fairy tales, a puerile impracticality forever out of reach. I was already living my own, and warts and all, it was shaping up to be a damn good one. Thank you so very much. I appreciate all of you hanging out with me. And Gail, can't wait to have this chat with you and talk a little bit more about what we're going to talk about.
That's great, Josh. Thank you so much for that reading and the performance. I so enjoyed your book, The Gospel According to Josh, where your story, so open and passionate, unfolds beautifully, revealing your innermost thoughts and the healing you experienced through storytelling. So thank you for sharing that with us. We have a lot to talk about, and but before I launch in, I just want to take a quick moment to remind the audience that posted in the chat is the tip jar. And any support you're able to donate tax deductibly is greatly appreciated. The Marsh receives 70% of its funding through ticket sales, and with no ticket sales, any donations are much appreciated. Also, we encourage comments and questions from the audience. So you can, whether you're in our Zoom audience or YouTube audience, you can pose those questions. They will get to us. And lately, because our conversations are always so good and the time passes so quickly, I haven't always read out all the comments, but please know that we'll do as many as we can, and that Josh, as do all our guests in their respective shows, will get a copy of the comments and questions. So don't hold back, and we'll, of course, get to as many as we can on the live platform. So now back to our conversation, Josh. And what was it like writing this show and the book? This must have been a very healing experience for you?
Yeah, it was. It was really a healing experience by accident. Like I had no idea, no vocabulary around this at all. And so when I first was doing this, I was in a class. The teacher was Matt Hoverman, who is no longer teaching solo work anymore, but he did for a very long time. He's brilliant writer and teacher. And I remember the first time I wrote my dad and brought it to class, and he was like, that was nice, but you can't out the bastard on stage. And so I just learned that I had to really learn about the man to write him, and I had to learn how to empathize with him, and to do that, that inadvertently helped me let go of some of the anger and that I had towards various people in my experience writing the show, and also the anger I had around myself. And so the writing, and then of course, writing the book was just a whole nother experience, because that was several years later. And I, it was almost like psychodrama in a way, being able to write this and then read it and do readings and things like that. So it was very useful, and it was not intentionally healing, but it definitely ended up being that way, and I'm super grateful for that.
That's great. What was your family's reaction to the play and the book?
Well, they were cool about it. My mom was an interesting thing, because my dad had just died, and this was 2010, and she wanted to talk a lot about the past, and we really not in that place, really up until maybe a couple years ago, like a year and a half ago, to really talk about that productively. So we had a hard time with that, and I had a hard time with my mom around that period anyway. My siblings were pretty cool about it, and they had their own, but they were super supportive. And after that first showing in New York, there had been some other local ones, and I didn't really want them to see it anymore, because I felt like I was censoring myself a little bit when I was performing it. So I just started telling them that tickets were too expensive, kind of a thing, and I couldn't get comps. But it's just weird doing it for family, because it's them, but it's not them. It's my perception of them, and sometimes they're composite characters and stuff. So, but it's cool. They're super supportive, and they know I do it with the suicide prevention work now, so that makes it even more special, I think, for them.
Mhm. It's interesting you say that about it's not them, it's what you think of them, because I heard a phrase recently that I'm not who you think I am, you're who you think I am. So I think that's an interesting phrase. What kind of reception have you received from the play and the book with audiences? Was it as you
Yeah,
expected?
yeah, it's been cool. It's been great. Because we're having this conversation, I wouldn't just, I guess, voluntarily bring this up, I guess, on the street or whatever. But I mean, I know specifically, like, it's saved lives. I have people who are still in my life who kind of beat down the door in my life, and they were like, I saw you in this, at this place or this place, or wherever I was doing the show. And they're like, you provided healing in our family. And in fact, there's a young lady who I ended up editing her memoir for her, and that was in a professional way. And it turned out, and I didn't know this until I was editing her book, but and I knew she'd come to see my show at a specific college in New Jersey, but she actually, the night she came to see my show, she was planning on killing herself. And then we had our talkback, and I did the show and I did the education around it. And she, it wasn't just me. Like there was support there, and there were people there who were strategically placed to be supportive. And so she did not, and she's alive and she's a counselor now. It's been a few years, and I'm incredibly proud of her. And the book has been great. It's actually on the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. It's on their recommended reading list for survivors of loss. So that's pretty cool to sort of have that validation. And yeah, it's been great. This book and this play have afforded me a lot in life because of the route that I've chosen to go with it. And I
Yeah, how
wouldn't.
did you decide to pair them, the play and the book?
Uh, well, I decided to pair the play with suicide prevention. I don't do a lot with the book anymore because I have a different book series where I'm telling other people's stories or curating their stories. It's called the Impossible Project. But there's a series. The sixth one is coming out in next week, actually. But anyway, so
And for the Impossible Project?
yeah, it's called
Talk
Limit.
about that for a minute. I love how it's so everybody can understand because you're not looking at it. The I'm Possible Project.
Yeah, so it's instead of impossible, it's I'm possible. So it's the word impossible, but with an apostrophe between the I and the M. And to me, it's just storytelling brings impossible to I'm possible. It's when we tell stories around any social justice issue or anything where we're trying to make massive societal change. Stories change the game. It's no longer they and them. It's not we and us. And we get to be collective and we get to normalize difficult conversations. And so the series that I have, it's all 1,000 words apiece, each of the stories, and this new book has 20 stories in it. But the series in general, I mean, it's overcoming big obstacles and like what you've learned in the aftermath. So it's like mental health, mental illness, a trans man finding love for the first time. This new one is a lot of stories of first responders overcoming and managing their post-traumatic stress that they, got maybe from on the job or something of that nature. And so I'm just very proud of these 140 some odd authors that I've been able to work with
Wow.
these past like 4 years because they're doing what I've done, but in a different way. And I'm not the only one who does this either. But we're telling the difficult and the ugly parts of our life to prevent, to as a gift for other people to say, hey, like I hope you can take something from this and you don't have to suffer or go through a difficult period like I did, or we can mitigate the symptoms or we can lessen the blow. And and one thing I say, like when I talk about suicide prevention, uh, I'll often say I'm not really in suicide prevention. I'm in suffering prevention because if somebody to get to that place, they're suffering. They're having a very difficult time. Almost certainly, it's an emotional pain that they're dealing with, hopelessness. So yeah, of course you can die if you want. Like everybody has that right, but I don't want people to be suffering and to feel like they are alone and lost and have nobody towards the end of their life. And so if we prevent the suffering, then we prevent the suicide,
Mhm.
And so I'm in suffering prevention. And really all of those stories, they're upstream of suicide prevention. We're getting to it before we have to say it. And so so these beautiful people and these beautiful authors are in what I call suffering prevention as well. So super
So
grateful.
how can people connect with you in this project?
So yeah, you can. There's a couple ways. I mean, you could certainly email me directly if you want. Josh at IAM as in Mary, IamPossibleProject.com. You can go to the website, IamPossibleProject.com. Right now it's in pre-order, so if you feel like pre-ordering, you can do that. It's IamPossibleProject.com/pre-order. And there's several other books on the website. And I mean, if you can't afford it, just hit me up and we'll figure it out. I'm not super worried about the financial end of it. I mean, that's always nice. I'm an artist at heart, so I mean, it's good to make a living. But this, there's other rewards than that around this project, and it's been pretty great. I mean, that's those three journal papers that you mentioned, Gail, in the beginning and in the bio. those are in part based on stories from the Impossible Project. And I was able to work with somebody who wanted to, uh, somebody who wanted to code that, and they're head of the social work department at University of Texas at Arlington. So they did a lot of the scientific work. And I saw that Brian shared the website real quick. It's not project at the end. It's just I am. Oh no, it is. I'm sorry. You got it right, Brian. My bad. Never mind. Gail.
And we are going to be posting more. You're going to be showing some slides in a bit that will have a lot of resources on them, and they will be cached here within the show. So they're going to be available for people. And there was also talk, I think Brian, our producer, is going to be putting them on the website on your page, so that there'll be a lot of resources there for people. When discussing suicide and prevention, what are the precautions? Are there any precautions we should take or language we should use?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things so just speaking from my own experience, and when I talk about suicide prevention, like I'll never talk about methodology. I'll never talk about how my dad died or how my grandfather died. And the reason for that is I don't know who's in the room who's vulnerable. Maybe they only knew about X methodology and they didn't know about Y, and so they're vulnerable and they're not feeling mentally well at the moment, and so they might, oh my gosh, I didn't know Y existed. I'll do that. That's dangerous. I mean, that's why 13 Reasons Why was so dangerous when they showed the suicide on screen. That was just a dangerous thing to do. If we want to show people as little action as possible. The other thing, one thing that I'm starting to educate people on a little more is that we don't say commit suicide. So and so died by suicide, or was a death by suicide. There's a few reasons why. The major reason is the word commit is generally associated with like committing a sin or committing a crime. And so somebody who's unwell might be thinking, well, I'm about to commit suicide. I'm going to commit sin. I'm going to commit a crime. And generally, somebody who's experiencing suicidal ideation is probably ashamed or having a difficult time. Generally speaking, there's a lot of stigma around seeking out help and being in the throes of suicidality in general. Anyway, and so we want to prevent people from feeling like they're bad or they're sinful or they're weak or whatever. And so we want to take that language away, and by doing so, we're removing one extra barrier of entry to getting help. Like, you're not committing a sin, you're not committing a crime, you're a human being, and you need help, and that's really all that's happening. And then, like, just certain like first person language is really important as well around mental illness, even like which when untreated can lead to suicidal ideation. That's not the only thing, of course, but so first person language around things like being having bipolar disorder. Like you say, I hear people say sometimes, I'm bipolar. No, you're not. You have bipolar. You would never say I am cancer or I am AIDS. We don't speak that way, but we do that. Or like, so and so is an addict. No, they're not. They're experiencing addiction. So and so is homeless. No, so and so is experiencing home insecurity. We've got to be careful around these things. And I know I'm kind of broadening the conversation a little bit here, but when we talk about things outside of first person language, then we make that person that thing, right? Now you are bipolar. Now you're an addict, and now we're going to expect you to act however an addict or someone bipolar acts, when it's a part of you and not all of you. So language is important. And
language is very important. There's someone here, and I'm not sure. There's someone here that's asking about a third son that lived with them while when he was in high school. His sister committed suicide when she was in high school, and he feels counseling would be helpful to him. But he hasn't followed through on any counseling. What could someone say to him when his mother was telling him, he's responsible for her death, to encourage him to get counseling? It's years later, but how could you help somebody that needs that kind of assistance? Because those feelings don't go away. Those feelings are sometimes buried deep within us, and we need to be reminded that we're not alone and there's help.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So just for context, I didn't quite follow all that scenario, but I can still answer the question. And so I'm going to give some sort of meta level ideas here about how to encourage somebody to get help around anything. For one, especially when we're suggesting somebody to go into counseling, a lot of like there's so much stigma around counseling in general. I've seen a counselor. I'm not currently seeing one, but I've seen one for years and years at a time. And I just moved, so I'm working through that. But that being said, a lot of times when we want somebody to display a certain behavior, we need to display that behavior first. So if you want somebody to go to counseling, then you need to be able to talk about the benefits of counseling as well. And if you've never been to counseling, then you probably have no business recommending somebody go to counseling. It's just not fair. It doesn't. It's not a good look. So you need to be willing to go to see a counselor if possible. If seeing a counselor is difficult, I'm gonna put some resources up in a little bit. But there are such things as sliding scale, which means that certain providers will charge you based on your income threshold, and they won't charge you full price necessarily. If you have insurance through the Affordable Care Act, there should be Obamacare, as some of us know it as. Then mental health care is a provision in the ACA, and so there should be mental health care providers in your network based on where you live, right? So there's some ideas. There's also teletherapy. There's other things. Now, traditional counseling, there's certain ways to sort of work around that too. There's peer counseling. There's group therapy. National Alliance on Mental Illness. They don't do group therapy necessarily, but there's regional chapters, and a lot of times they'll offer things like family to family. So it's not even group; it's more so just like you hear other people's experiences about what they've gone through: mental illness, mental health, caregiving for someone living with mental illness. So so there's other ways to sort of get that experience and to slowly introduce somebody into what therapy means, and then just getting somebody to talk and open up in general as a peer. Sometimes it's good to take a walk, like kind of getting them moving, like they don't feel like speaking about it. There's that's just kind of a one way to do it. If you don't feel comfortable speaking to me, is there somebody else you feel comfortable talking to? Sometimes that works. So there's we don't have a ton of time, and that's okay. That's not entirely what we're here for, but those are just some ideas.
Um, Thank you. I seem to be having a little bit of a sound issue here, but I want to let's talk about COVID, how it's affecting people's mental health and suicide rates. I know that the impact of the COVID pandemic has been great, and there's a lot of evidence. There's even talk that the effects will live on past the COVID because we have a lot of anxiety and depression and isolation that people are experiencing. So some of what you just said certainly applies here, and how to be able to help people get help. Do you have any comments to make about how this is affecting people's mental health and suicide rates?
Sure, absolutely. So what we're seeing right now is there's just so much major change happening all at one time. And a lot of major change happening all at one time can be a catalyst for suicidal ideation, suicidal thinking, and even attempts. So, and that's something that I experienced 9 years ago when I was considering dying. Not that I wanted to be there. I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to feel that emotional pain, right? And that's a very consistent theme with suicide attempt survivors and people, a lot of people I know. So it's not that we want to die, we just want to feel the way that we're feeling. So back to COVID, a lot of major change happening all at one time. Also, I would imagine, I believe, and I'm pretty certain that many of us, if not all of us, are going through grieving right now. We're mourning. We don't know it. A lot of us don't know it. We've never experienced this level of trauma before. We've never experienced this level of all these major changes. And so the loss of graduation, the loss of a job, the loss of having to spend time in isolation with somebody you don't like, a lot of these things happening all at one time, right? So what happens during the grieving process? Anger, denial, acceptance, etc., right? And we don't know how to manage that. Why am I tired all the time? Why am I taking things out on my spouse or something? I don't usually act like that. and I'm super anxious and I don't know what to do with it. So now I'm depressed because I'm anxious. That's part of my cycle too with my conditions is if I get overly anxious and I don't take care of it, then I get depressed about it. So this interesting cycle, but generally I do take care of it very, very well. That being said, suicide rates are up right now. We don't have official numbers because the CDC doesn't release them for 2 years because it takes a while for reporting standards and for all the coroners in the United States to turn in their numbers. That being said, uh, whether the rates are going up or not, we need to not social distance, but physical distance if we're going to distance at all. Social distance, let's stay connected to one another. Let's let's continue to check in with our loved ones, even if we don't feel like it. I can tell you at the beginning of COVID, when things first hit in early March, mid March, really, my anxiety spiked, and I just was just not in a mindset where I was even considering that it was my anxiety. It was just like this. I'm up here all the time. My stomach is in my throat, and then I started to connect to people, and I realized that other people were experiencing that, and that brought it down. And then as it came down, I was able to access more and more of my coping mechanisms and skills and things like that. So right now, self care is super important, taking care of ourselves, taking time to rest, to nap, to do whatever you need to do to connect to one another. Know your resources, whether that's for food, whether that's for housing, whether that's for medical, whether that's for some of the resources that we'll put up in a few moments around mental health and suicide prevention.
Mhm.
Knowing our resources and staying connected to our circles is going to be so very important, and being gentle, and the awareness around the grieving and the awareness around that we're having a difficult time allows you to almost in a couple it allows you to be more gentle with yourself. It
Mhm.
allows you to be easier on yourself and less judgmental, like I should be doing this or that. No, you need to be resting right now
Right.
because of X, Y, and Z, right? And allows you to, like, I'm not bad, I'm just acting out because I'm having a difficult time, and then I can choose to do differently as I move forward and refine and smooth things out, right? So COVID is definitely having a hard time is definitely giving us a hard time around our mental health and wellness for sure.
And this awareness and these coping skills are things that you learned. You yourself were suicidal and had a history in your family, and you learned that there is prevention that can help through intervention and through learning some of these skills and being aware of what's going on. Changing Minds, a toolkit for mental health. Tell us about you have a curriculum that combines the lecture, storytelling, and group discussion.
Yeah. So it's 5 modules: the basics of mental health, coping skills, storytelling and support systems, living with mental illness, and suicide prevention. And each of these modules can either be the I can deliver, or a facilitator on site can deliver. The outlines are very picked by numbers. They come with PowerPoint. They come with alternative exercises and things like that. So in some cases, they've been student led, and it's just a way for people to up their vocab around mental health and wellness, to learn coping mechanisms and skills that take what you like, leave the rest. Not all the ones that we list or that we come up with that we discuss are going to be right for you, but I were like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize that that was one of my coping mechanisms as a good one, but I also didn't realize other people did that too. So you have this point of commonality. Storytelling is definitely integrated in it as well to normalize the concepts, and I'm super proud of it. And the suicide prevention module was actually digitized and incorporated into a social emotional learning catalog by a company called Imago, IMAGO. So I'm very proud of that as well. So the curriculum is sort of branching out and helping people and spreading its tentacles a little bit. So very excited about that.
That's terrific. I think it's time to put up your slides so we can see some of these resources.
For sure. Let me do that. And I'll talk through these a little bit as well. So the
Okay.
hotline is 800-273-8255. It's US. It's 24/7. Looks like within the next couple of years they're going to make it 988 as its own, like it's 911, but this will be 988. Crisis text line, go to 741-741. I've personally volunteered with the Trevor Project before, and they're fantastic. If you happen to be cis and hetero, they're not going to hang up on you. They're pretty cool. Steve Fund, Therapy for Black Girls, Fireflies Unite, beautiful. I think it's important to have Black and brown and diverse resources because representation matters. And in some cases, you might say, I want to talk to someone who looks and sounds like me, or I want to hear Black voices or brown voices or trans Asian voices. Go for it. That's what we need at times. And so I want to be an advocate and provide these aggregated resources. These are not my resources, but these are some folks who I've uh, experienced second and third hand, and I've been on all these websites and all these Instagram handles. So there's some pretty cool stuff happening here. Queering psychology, and we have some Latinx resources as well, and some Asian Pacific Islanders, some BIPOC at the bottom. And again, we're recording, right? So you'll be able to stop this. I might be going a little quickly, but Indigenous Americans, I think it's important that we represent as well. So there's various resources, and that's not even an exhaustive list. But I needed to get as many as I could on 4 to 5 slides. So I'm going to stop my share, and then I'll.
That is so helpful. I'm so grateful to you for presenting tonight and for these resources, and other people will be able to access those as well. And I love that they are for different communities and for people, to be able to identify with Black or brown or Indigenous or queer, whatever it is. It is very important to have those communities. It's something that is a helpful resource. Josh, our time goes so fast. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to make?
Just thank you to the theater. Support the theater, the arts. The arts is I think was what defines us as a society. So we need to keep the arts alive. It's what helps us make sense of life. And so let's continue to support the Marsh and other artistic formats and forms and theater companies. And also, if anyone out there is feeling hopeless, you are not alone. You are loved. You may think nobody out there cares for me or loves me, and maybe that is somewhat true in your existing circle, but I can tell you that there are people out there in this world who love and care about you who you have not met yet. So please stick around for us. We need you. You're part of a beautiful tapestry, and yeah. So
Thank you.
thank you so very much.
Very special thank you to you, Josh Rivedal, for tonight's featured presentation of The Gospel According to Josh. This show is cached on the Solo Hearts Heal page, and if you're looking for the resources, you'll find them posted there. Remember, you're not alone out there. We're all in this together. Next week, September 23rd, we have Cynthia Shaw, Velvet Determination, a musical journey about wrong notes, hard knocks, and the keys to success. In this autobiographical show, Cynthia relates the youthful determination of her younger self as she confronts her own personal demons while meeting idiosyncratic characters who either inspired, helped, or hindered her journey. And it's complete with musical impersonations of world-famous classical pianists, and she'll demonstrate her piano technique and musical sensitivity as she performs the live classical piano music of Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, Chopin, and Debussy. We'll see some of that next week. Look for upcoming Solo Hearts Heal shows on the Marsh stream and much more at themarsh.org. Again, thank you, Josh, and to our Zoom and YouTube audiences, Marsh stream producers Brian and Brianna. We're all in this together. See you next week. Brian?
Thank you, Joshua, for joining us. Gail, for another beautiful Solo Arts Heals episode. And thank you to our Zoom and YouTube watchers. We appreciate you being here with us tonight. Join us tomorrow, Thursday, for Stephanie's Marsh stream. Of course, Friday, bingo with Josh Kornbluth. And then come back on Saturday for Fred Pitt's live full-length performance of Aren't You? So with that being said, everybody have a great evening, and we will see you on the Marsh stream. Bye-bye.